Welcome to Pressure Points. Our topic is decoding Jensen's comments from NVIDIA's GTC keynote. And as of a recording, which is about an hour after the keynote ended, shares of NVIDIA up are about 4.5%. They entered the keynote up about 1.5%. And they started to move higher on a comment that he had towards the end of the keynote, where he said that they have cumulative demand for Blackwell and Rubin of $500 billion through the end of calendar 26. So there are some assumptions you need to do to go through to decrypt what he's saying here. And I think it's reasonable that his message is that there is 15%, 15% upside to the street numbers over the next 5 quarters. Now, that excludes any sort of incremental revenue from China. It excludes any incremental sales they may have, which I'm sure they will between now and the end of calendar 26, and also assumes that they will be able to meet that demand, which is a big X factor. Over the past year and a half, they've been running a couple quarters behind in terms of what they're able to supply. So the manufacturing piece, the supply side, has been a governing factor in terms of their growth. But needless to say, his message at the highest level, the most simple level, is that they are still early in their build out. And before I get into how I got to that plus 15% number, I'll go through all the math. I just want to re-emphasize that you can debate, I think, whether a couple assumptions here and there and what they're trying to say, but you're going to kind of land in that 10 to 20% upside scenario. And at the highest level, again, he's sending a message that demand is moving ahead of what I think have been high expectations. And so that's also good news for the broader AI trade. It's probably a read in terms of what we're going to hear from the hyperscalers over the next couple of days in terms of their CapEx build out. You'll see that Google and Amazon number likely move higher when they give their commentary about how they see CapEx. So that's the pressure point. I'm going to jump into the numbers. How do we get to that plus 15%? And it starts again with that $500 billion cumulative Rubin and Blackwell. Now that excludes their networking business, but Rubin and Blackwell through the end of calendar 26. Now Jensen mentioned that they've been selling Blackwell for 3.5 quarters, and they've sold 6 million chips so far. Now, I went back and looked at their transcript from their July quarter, and they did not give a 6 million number. That wasn't there. There wasn't a different number in terms of how many Blackwells were sold. And so I'm going to go off the belief. I'm going to assume that his comment about 6 million was basically as of today. And I want to note that that assumption is going to have a pretty big impact. If in fact that 6 million was a number at the end of July, then that would make that gap, that 15% gap, much smaller. But we're going to take it as that he's talking about 6 million as of today and a $25,000 ASP, which means that they've already sold about 150 billion in Blackwell. So we take that 500 billion and subtract 150 billion, you get to 350 billion in revenue. Now we have to add back their networking business, which is about 40 billion expected over the next 5 quarters. So essentially what he's saying is we're going to do 390 billion over the next 5 quarters. Now the street's at 335 billion. And so the difference between 335 and 390 is just over 15%, just for some context. That's where I get that 15% number. Now again, that excludes what additional sales, excludes what could happen in China, and also excludes the potential negative impact that they simply can't supply enough of these. And I want to talk about the sensitivity on they can't supply enough of these. Clearly, they've got a ton of demand. Now, if they, in fact, fall short of that and they don't beat numbers by 15%, they're likely going to push the numbers for calendar 27 higher. And I think from a stock perspective, that's probably even better for them to have 10, 15% upside this year and have 10, 15% upside for calendar 27. But as it stands today, he's saying they're tracking plus 15% versus the street. I think it's probably going to be plus 20% or better because they're going to keep selling. And I think that they'll be able to make enough of them to get there. It also sets up for calendar 27 being a good year. And We're going to keep analyzing these numbers, but I think this is just a good starting point and a good takeaway from Jensen's comments today. On behalf of Pressure Points, bye for now.